The morning light slanted across the 47th floor, catching on glass walls and polished marble floors as if the building itself were a cathedral to power. Khloe Bennett had just placed the final folder on Robert Carter's mahogany desk when she heard the sharp echo of voices from the hallway. They weren't the measured tones of board members or the polite murmur of clients. They were louder, heavier, commanding. She stepped closer to her desk, pen in hand, pretending to focus, though every nerve in her body prickled with unease. A tall man with silver-streaked hair appeared first, his stride filled with authority. Richard Carter. Everyone in the company knew him, the father who had built the empire before passing it to his son. And at his side, a woman whose presence felt as cold as the winter wind outside. Madison Harrington, the woman Khloe had heard whispered about in hushed tones, the heiress destined to be Robert Carter's bride. They entered Robert's office without knocking, as if walls and doors were just ceremonial obstacles. Khloe tried to keep her gaze fixed on her notes, but the voices rose, sharp and cutting, and curiosity dragged her closer. She wasn't prepared for the way the conversation spilled into the open air when Robert's door was left ajar. "You will give them an answer tonight." Richard's tone carried the weight of decades of expectation. "I already gave you my answer," Robert replied, each word clipped, precise, dangerous. Madison's voice slithered in, sweet but calculated. "Darling, you're overthinking this. It isn't a death sentence, just a marriage, a logical step for the good of your family." Khloe's stomach twisted. Marriage arranged like a merger, love treated as a detail too trivial to matter. She could almost feel Robert's restraint unraveling through the timbre of his voice. Then, before she could retreat, Robert emerged. His green eyes, sharp and glinting like emerald glass, landed on Khloe. The moment stretched, silent yet thunderous. Richard's commanding presence and Madison's expectant smile filled the air, but Robert seemed to see only her. And then it happened. 3 long strides carried him across the space, his hand rising with a certainty that stunned even himself. He cupped Khloe's face, and without a single word, pressed his lips to hers. Khloe froze, the world vanishing in the shock of it. His touch was warm, his kiss hard and unyielding, the taste of coffee and fire crashing into her senses. Her pen clattered to the floor, forgotten. She was not invisible anymore. Not to him, not to anyone. When he pulled away, his arm still anchored her by the waist. His voice was calm, deliberate, as though nothing about this moment was accidental. "Dad, Madison, I'd like you to meet my girlfriend." The silence was so sharp it could have shattered glass. Richard Carter's eyes narrowed, disbelief and fury simmering in equal measure. Madison's painted smile collapsed into something raw, her disbelief as sharp as a blade. Khloe's heart slammed against her ribs, breath shallow, mind racing. Had this man, this ruthless billionaire who valued control above everything, just thrown her into a storm to save himself? Or had something deeper sparked in him, something even he couldn't restrain? As the echo of his words hung heavy in the air, Khloe realized her life had just been rewritten in a single reckless kiss. What she didn't know was whether it was the beginning of her ruin or the beginning of something far more dangerous. The moment the office doors closed after his father and Madison stormed out, silence wrapped around the 47th floor like a storm waiting to break. Khloe stood frozen beside the desk, her pulse thundering in her ears. She could still feel the heat of Robert Carter's lips on hers, the weight of his arm around her waist, the echo of his words calling her his girlfriend. She had spent her life trying to stay invisible, to do her work quietly and perfectly. And now she had been thrust into the spotlight of the most powerful family in Manhattan. Robert stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders tight as if carrying the weight of an empire. His reflection in the glass looked every bit the ruthless billionaire people whispered about. But there was something else too, a flicker of unrest that betrayed him. Finally he spoke, his voice low and rough. "You probably think I am insane." Khloe's lips parted, but no sound came. She wanted to demand an explanation, to ask why he had dragged her into his war, but the words tangled in her throat. Robert turned, his green eyes locking on hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I need you to play along." The words fell heavy between them. Khloe blinked, stunned. Play along. Pretend to be his lover, his shield, his way out. Robert walked closer, every step deliberate. "My father is determined to marry me off like I am a piece on his chessboard. Madison is more interested in our family's fortune than in me. I will not be trapped in a loveless arrangement for the rest of my life." Khloe found her voice, though it trembled. "And your solution is to kiss your secretary in front of them all." His mouth curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. "It was the only move I had in that moment. But it worked. They believed it." Her heart pounded as the truth unraveled. He had used her. One reckless kiss had not been about her at Maun, all but about power, rebellion, escape. Still, his eyes held hers with a strange vulnerability that softened his arrogance. "I know what I am asking," he said, lowering his voice. "It will not be easy, but if you help me, if you agree to stand by me as my girlfriend, even if it is only an act, you will be well rewarded. Double your salary, a bonus large enough to change your life, and protection. No one in this company will dare to cross you again." Khloe stared at him, the promise of freedom from debt and security for her mother's medical bills flashing before her eyes. Yet beneath the tempting offer lurked danger. Aligning herself with Robert meant becoming a target for his enemies, for Madison, for every gossip column in New York. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have chosen anyone." "Because you are the only one who looked me in the eye and told me no," he answered simply. "You are not afraid of me, and I need someone who is not afraid." Her breath caught. For the first time, the ruthless billionaire looked almost human. His power felt less like a shield and more like armor hiding someone who was terrified of being caged. Khloe drew in a shaky breath. "If I say yes, there will be rules. No surprises, no humiliations. And if either of us starts confusing this performance with reality, we end it immediately." Robert's expression shifted, as if he had not expected her to set boundaries. His gaze sharpened, then softened, respect flickering in his eyes. "Deal." He extended his hand. She hesitated, knowing this moment would bind her to him in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The same jolt she had felt that morning shot through her veins, electric and undeniable. His fingers tightened just slightly, as though he too felt the dangerous current. "Very well, Miss Bennett," Robert said, his voice steadier now. "Tomorrow the world will know, now that you are mine." Khloe's heart lurched. She could not tell if he meant it as strategy, as possession, or as something far more dangerous. And as night fell over the skyscrapers of Manhattan, she realized her ordinary life had ended the moment his lips touched hers. What lay ahead was a storm of power, deception, and desire, and there was no turning back. The following morning, the office buzzed with whispers that died whenever Khloe stepped into a room. She could feel the stares on her back, the weight of questions no one dared to ask out loud. She kept her head high, hands steady on the folders she carried, though inside her nerves were a storm. Every time she remembered the kiss, the way Robert had pulled her close, her breath faltered. It had been reckless, it had been calculated, but it had also felt like something else, something she was afraid to name. Robert's door opened and his voice cut through the tense air. "Miss Bennett inside now." She obeyed, her heels clicking against the marble as she stepped into the sanctum of his office. He was behind his desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie abandoned, a man who seemed sculpted by control yet fraying at the edges. He studied her in silence, eyes tracing her face with an intensity that made her chest tighten. At last he reached into the drawer of his desk and placed a small velvet box on the polished wood between them. "Open it." Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate white gold necklace with a star-shaped pendant, its tiny diamonds catching the morning light. It was beautiful, but there was more than beauty in his eyes as he watched her reaction. "It belonged to my mother," he said quietly. She wore it every day, not for status or glamour, but because it reminded her of the only thing that mattered to her: choice. My father gave it to her not as a command, but as a promise. Khloe's throat tightened. She understood immediately what this meant. He was offering her something real, not a shiny accessory to make their lie belay, a fable, but a piece of his history, of his heart. "I cannot accept this," she whispered. "It is too personal." "You must," he insisted, his tone sharper now. "My family can sense lies from across a ballroom. If we are to convince them, it has to be something they believe, and they will believe this." She hesitated, staring at the necklace glinting in the velvet box. Accepting it meant more than wearing jewelry. It meant carrying his trust, and the dangerous responsibility that came with it. She finally nodded. "Then help me put it on." Robert rose and came around the desk. The air shifted as he stood close enough for her to smell the faint cedar of his cologne. She turned, lifting her hair, exposing the vulnerable curve of her neck. His fingers brushed against her skin as he fastened the clasp, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Her breath caught, goosebumps rising on her arms. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice so close to her ear it sent a shiver racing down her spine. She turned to face him, and for a moment they stood frozen in the charged silence of the office, green eyes locked with brown, 1,000 unspoken words hanging between them. His hand hovered at her shoulder, as if fighting a war between restraint and desire. Then the phone on his desk rang, shattering the moment. He stepped back sharply, raking a hand through his hair. "Tonight we rehearse our story," he said, forcing his voice back to its usual cold control. "Dinner at my apartment, 7:30. No excuses." Khloe nodded, though her heart was still racing. She touched the necklace at her throat, feeling its weight settle like a promise she did not fully understand. As she left his office, one thought consumed her. This was supposed to be an act, a performance to protect him from a future he did not want. Yet with every step, every look, every whispered word, the performance was beginning to feel dangerously real. Rain fell softly over the long driveway that led to the Carter mansion, the kind of drizzle that soaked the air with tension. Khloe sat stiffly in the back of the black limousine, her fingers twisting the hem of her silk dress. The necklace Robert had placed on her hours earlier gleamed against her skin, as if reminding her she carried more than a borrowed role tonight. She carried his trust, his defiance, maybe even his future. Robert sat beside her, perfectly composed in a tailored suit, though Khloe could sense the tightness in his jaw, the unspoken pressure clawing at him. He reached for her hand suddenly, his grip firm and grounding. "Remember," he murmured, "they are not gods. They are just people. You belong here as much as any of them." His words were steady, but the flicker in his green eyes betrayed a man who feared failure more than he feared his father's wrath. The mansion's front doors opened to reveal a hall bathed in golden light. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead. Portraits of Carter's past stared down from the walls, and every corner radiated wealth designed to intimidate. Dozens of eyes turned the moment they entered, whispers rippling like wind through tall grass. Robert's arm tightened around Khloe's waist, holding her close as though daring anyone to challenge her presence. An elegant woman approached first, blonde hair swept back with practiced grace. "Aunt Patricia," Robert said with a polite smile. "Khloe, this is my mother's sister." Patricia's gaze softened the moment it landed on the necklace at Khloe's throat, and her smile turned genuine. "Welcome, my dear," she said warmly, guiding them deeper into the throng. Already Khloe felt a quiet victory. The necklace was not just decoration, it was armor. But the real test came when they reached the fireplace, where the family patriarch sat like a king on his throne. Theodore Carter, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, a man whose approval still commanded the respect of every generation after him. "So this is the woman who dares to steal my grandson's attention," Theodore declared, his voice strong enough to hush the room. Khloe inclined her head with a graceful poise she had not known she possessed. "It is an honor to meet you, Mr. Carter." His eyes sparkled, and he motioned her closer. "Sit," he commanded. "Tell me, how did you manage to tame this wolf?" Laughter spread across the room, though Robert's expression remained taut. Khloe took a careful breath, then spoke clearly. I did not tame him. Wolves cannot be tamed. But sometimes, if you are brave enough, you can walk beside them. A ripple of surprise passed through the gathering. Theodore's laughter boomed, delighted. "Clever girl," he said, patting her hand. "Perhaps you are the first one to truly see him." But before the warmth of approval could settle, another voice sliced through the room like a blade. "What a surprise to find you here." Madison Harrington stood framed in the doorway, her red gown glistening like spilled wine, her blue eyes sharp and unyielding. At her side was a man with the polished air of old money, his arm casually linked with hers. Khloe felt the shift instantly. The air grew taut, the whispers sharpened. Madison moved closer, her smile laced with venom. "How charming to finally meet the woman who has stolen Robert's heart," she said sweetly, her gaze flicking to the necklace. "Such a pretty piece. Pity it is wasted." Robert's hand found Chloe's shoulder in a silent vow of protection, but she stepped forward before he could speak, her voice calm and steady. "It is not wasted, Madison. Some things gain their true worth only when given to the right person." The room fell into silence, all eyes fixed on the two women. Theodore's cane tapped against the floor once, twice, then stilled. His piercing gaze moved deep between them, reading more than words, sensing the undercurrent of war that had only just begun. And in that charged moment, Khloe realized she was no longer just playing a role. She was standing in the middle of a battlefield, with Robert's future and her own heart as the stakes. The gala at the Metropolitan Museum shimmered with chandeliers and the murmur of New York's most powerful voices. But for Khloe, the evening felt like a cage of glass and gold. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and Robert Carter played his role flawlessly, hand at the small of her back, gaze steady and protective. Yet beneath the performance, something restless stirred, a heat that made every accidental touch burn like fire. When the speeches ended and the crowd surged toward the ballroom, Robert leaned close to her ear. "Come with me." His voice was low, almost urgent. Without waiting for an answer, he guided her through a side door, down a corridor lined with marble statues, until they emerged onto a terrace that overlooked the glittering sweep of Central Park. The night air was cool, a welcome relief after the heat of the ballroom. Khloe drew a breath, but it caught when she saw the expression on Robert's face. He had shed the mask of control he wore in front of the world. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly disheveled, and his eyes, those green eyes that had unsettled her from the first moment, were filled with something raw, something dangerous. "You are doing perfectly," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Half the women in there are envious of the way I look at you." Her lips parted, surprise tightening in her chest, and the other half. The corner of his mouth lifted, but there was no arrogance in it. "They are envious of the way you look at me." Silence stretched, thick with meaning. Chloe's heart hammered as she searched his face, trying to decide if this was another line in their carefully rehearsed act or if something far more dangerous was unfolding. "Robe." Bart stepped closer, his hand lifting but stopping short of her cheek. "Why have you never asked me why I've avoided marriage?" he asked. "Because you would have given me the company answer," she said softly. "Focused on business. No time for distractions." His gaze darkened. "The truth is uglier. I told myself I didn't need anyone, that love was weakness, that if I kept my walls high enough, I would never be controlled, never hurt. But tonight, standing in that room with you, I realized something." Her breath caught. "What?" He closed the distance, his voice dropping to a whisper. "For the first time in years, I don't feel alone." The words sliced through her defenses, leaving her trembling. Robert's hand brushed against her face at last, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek with startling tenderness. Chloe's body betrayed her, leaning into his touch even as her mind screamed about boundaries and rules. "This is dangerous," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I know." His breath mingled with hers, and the city lights blurred behind him. "But tell me, does this still feel like pretending?" She shook her head before she could stop herself. "No." And then his lips were on hers. Not the reckless kiss of defiance that had started everything, but slow, deliberate, devastating. A kiss that carried no strategy, no performance, only truth. Khloe melted against him, her hands clutching his jacket, her body answering a question her mind refused to form. The world narrowed to the heat of his mouth, the steady thrum of his heart beneath her palm, the sensation that she was standing on the edge of something vast and irreversible. When at last they broke apart, Robert rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, breath uneven. "Khloe," he murmured, "what are we doing?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I don't know. But I can't pretend I don't feel this. Neither can I." The applause from inside the gala drifted faintly through the doors, a reminder that the world still waited beyond the terrace. But for that moment, neither of them moved. They were suspended between truth and lies, between duty and desire, on the precipice of a storm that would not wait much longer to break. The following week, the air in Carter Industries was heavy with whispers. Rumors moved faster than emails, darting from cubicle to cubicle like shadows. Khloe kept her focus on the contracts spread across her desk, but she could feel it, the shift in how people looked at her, as if every curious glance carried the same question. Was the secretary really the billionaire's lover? Or was it all a charade? The click of heels on marble snapped her from her thoughts. They were sharp, deliberate, the kind of heels that announced power long before the woman wearing them entered a room. Madison Harrington appeared in front of Khloe's desk, her Chanel suit pristine, her smile cold as winter glass. "Good morning," Madison said, lowering herself into the chair opposite without invitation. "I'm not here for Robert. I'm here for you." Khloe forced a polite smile, though her pulse stuttered. "If you'd like to schedule an appointment with Mr. Carter, I can—" "No need," Madison cut her off, pulling a slim folder from her Hermes bag and placing it on the desk between them. "This is more important." Khloe hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs, receipts, timestamps, even surveillance shots. Her breath caught. It was a private investigator's report, meticulously compiled. It painted a timeline that shredded the story Robert had carefully built. No evidence of a relationship before a few weeks ago, no shared purchases, no travel records. One picture taken on the terrace at the Met showed Robert and Khloe mid-conversation, but captured from an angle that stripped away intimacy and made it look staged. Madison leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. "I know what you are, a desperate little opportunist who thinks she can trade a kiss for a craw. Own. But your fantasy ends here." Khloe's hands gripped the edge of her desk, knuckles white, but she kept her voice calm. "And what exactly do you plan to do with this folder?" "Expose you," Madison whispered with a smile. "My family has invested 20 years into aligning with the Carters. You think I'll let a secretary from Savannah ruin that? I will burn your reputation until you can't get hired to serve coffee, let alone manage his office." Before Khloe could reply, Robert's door opened. He stepped out with 3 Japanese investors, his expression controlled and charming. The moment his eyes landed on Madison and the folder on Khloe's desk, his jaw tightened. Madison straightened, her voice suddenly sweet. "Robert, darling, I was just enlightening your assistant." Khloe rose to her feet, her voice clear enough to carry across the floor. "She's not enlightening me. She's trying to threaten me." Dozens of heads turned. The entire floor went silent. Madison's smile faltered. Khloe's voice grew stronger, her words ringing out. "Yes, Robert and I may have started unconventionally. Maybe we didn't follow your rules of timing and status. But I am not here for your money, Madison, and I am not afraid of your folder, because whatever you think you've uncovered, the truth is simpler. I love him." Gasps rippled through the office. Even Khloe herself was stunned by the force of her own admission, the way it broke free before she could hold it back. Robert crossed the floor in long strides, stopping beside her. His hand found hers, intertwining their fingers in front of everyone. His voice was low, but carried like thunder. "And I love her." The investors looked bewildered, the employees frozen, but the declaration was undeniable. Madison's mask cracked, anger flashing in her eyes as she gathered the folder and clutched her bag. "This isn't over," she hissed. Robert's green eyes burst. Ned with a dangerous calm. "Yes, it is." And in that moment, Khloe realized nothing would ever be the same. What had started as a reckless kiss was no longer a performance. It was a truth spoken aloud, a truth powerful enough to either save them or destroy them. The storm Madison left behind lingered long after her heels clicked out of sight. For days, the office pulsed with whispers, every employee dissecting Robert's public declaration. Khloe tried to bury herself in work, but the weight of being seen, truly seen, pressed heavy on her shoulders. She had spoken the truth aloud, and the truth had no way of being taken back. On a gray Friday morning, the atmosphere shifted again. Richard Carter appeared on the 47th floor without warning, his presence a shadow stretching over every corner of the office. The last time he had come, he had demanded obedience. Now his stride was slower, his gaze sharper, as if searching for something he could not name. "Miss Bennett," he said, stopping at her desk. His voice lacked its usual bite. "May I speak with you privately?" Khloe rose cautiously, leading him to the small waiting area near the windows. She braced herself for threats, for scorn, for another warning to stay out of family business. Instead, Richard sat heavily in the chair and clasped his hands, his eyes fixed on the Manhattan skyline. "My son is different," he said at last. "Do you know I watched him leave this office at 6 o'clock last night? 6, not 9, not midnight, 6. He took you to dinner, didn't he?" Khloe hesitated. "Yes." Richard nodded slowly, as though confirming a suspicion. "In 10 years, I have never seen Robert change his routine for anyone. Until you." She stared at him, caught between disbelief and caution. "What are you trying to say, Mr. Carter?" Richard's gaze moved to her, and for the first time she saw something startling in his eyes. Regret. "I spent my life building this empire. I thought duty would keep it standing. But perhaps I forgot that an empire without a happy heir is nothing but an empty monument." The words sank into her chest like stones in water. This was not the ruthless man who had barked about alliances and logical unions. This was a father confronting the cracks in his own design. "I came to apologize," Richard said, his voice rough. "For trying to force my son into a marriage he didn't want. For underestimating you. For assuming love was weakness." Khloe's throat tightened. She had braced herself for war, not surrender. He leaned forward, his tone more deliberate now. "The board and I have been discussing changes. We need to invest not just in profits, but in people. I want to create a new division, one that focuses on talent development and corporate culture. It will be yours, if you accept. Executive salary, full authority." Khloe's breath caught. The offer was more than she had ever dreamed, but it came with weight. It was not just a job. It was an acknowledgement that she had altered the very DNA of Carter Industries. Before she could respond, Robert's office door opened. He froze at the sight of his father speaking quietly with her. "Dad, what is this?" Richard rose slowly. "A long overdue change," he said. Then he looked at Khloe. "Think carefully, Miss Bennett. You are not just part of Robert's life now. You could shape the future of this company." And with that, he left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Robert stepped closer, green eyes burning with questions. "What did he say to you?" Khloe looked at him, heart pounding. Nothing either of us expected. The truth was clear. She was no longer just Robert's shield against an arranged marriage. She had become the center of a transformation too big to ignore, and the weight of it pressed closer with every passing hour. The announcement of Khloe's promotion spread through Carter Industries like wildfire. Overnight, the secretary who had arrived from Savannah became the new director of talent and culture, a position created by Richard Carter himself. Some employees congratulated her warmly, grateful for the programs she immediately proposed: mentorship networks, wellness initiatives, policies that valued people over profit. But others whispered in corners, their smiles brittle, their congratulations hollow. To them, she was not a leader. She was the boss's mistress who had been handed power she had not earned. Khloe ignored the whispers and threw herself into the work. Her days stretched late into the evening, drafting proposals, meeting employees at every level, trying to show she belonged. Yet no matter how hard she pushed, the unease clung to her. Every time she walked into the boardroom, she could feel the eyes on her, measuring her, doubting her. Robert noticed. One night after a long meeting, he found her in her new office, papers spread across the desk, her head in her hands. "You cannot fight them all at once," he said gently. His voice, usually so sharp, carried an edge of concern. She looked up at him, exhaustion shadowing her features. "They think I am here because of you. They think I slept my way into power." Robert stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. "Let them think what they want. You know the truth. I know the truth." But she shook her head. "That is not enough, Robert. If I cannot prove I deserve this, then I am nothing more than a convenient lie in a pretty necklace." The words cut him, though he did not show it. Instead, he knelt beside her chair, his green eyes burning with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are not a lie, Khloe. You are the first truth I have allowed into my life in years." Her heart twisted, but before she would answer, the phone on her desk rang, slicing through the moment. She lifted it reluctantly. The voice on the other end was icy, mocking. "Enjoying your throne, Miss Bennett." Her blood chilled. "Madison." "You did not think I would vanish so easily," Madison continued. "I have friends on the board, allies who are not so eager to see a secretary turned queen. You may have Robert fooled, but the rest of us see you clearly. And when the moment comes, you will fall." The line went dead. Khloe's hand trembled as she set the receiver down. Robert's eyes narrowed. What did she say? Khloe forced a steady breath. That she is not finished. Robert straightened, fury simmering beneath his calm facade. "Let her come. I will burn every bridge she tries to cross." But Khloe felt the warning settle in her chest like a stone. Madison was not a woman who threatened lightly. She was planning something bigger than folders and whispered gossip. And if Khloe was not ready, everything she had fought for, her job, her reputation, even her fragile new love with Robert, could shatter in a single strike. That night, as she lay awake in her Brooklyn apartment, staring at the necklace that glowed faintly against her collarbone, Khloe realized the truth. She was no longer just playing a role in Robert's life. She was a soldier in a war, and Madison had just promised to open fire. The Carter Foundation's annual charity gala was meant to be a glittering night of elegance, a display of wealth and power polished for New York's finest. The ballrooms sparkled under chandeliers, champagne flowed like rivers of gold, and photographers hovered like vultures waiting to catch the smallest slip. For Khloe, the night felt like a trial disguised in silk and diamonds. Every glance lingered on her too long. Every whisper seemed to follow her across the marble floor. Robert's hand never left the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd, his presence steady, his smile practiced. But Khloe could feel the tension in him, the way his shoulders held too much weight. He was protecting her, yet tonight she sensed even his armor might crack. It happened when the speeches began. Richard Carter took the stage first, his voice deep and commanding as he spoke of the family's legacy and the billions pledged to education programs. Applause thundered. But as the lights shifted and the next speaker was announced, Khloe's stomach twisted. Madison Harrington glided onto the stage, her crimson gown a deliberate statement, her smile a blade hidden in silk. She began with charm, thanking the Carters for their generosity, praising Robert's vision for the future. Then her words sharpened. "Some of us know what it means to build a legacy through generations of commitment," she said, her eyes flicking toward Khloe. "And some legacies are being jeopardized by distractions." The room shifted uneasily. Murmurs rose like smoke. Khloe's pulse quickened. Madison's gaze slid back to the audience, and with a theatrical pause she gestured toward the wings. "Perhaps we should let the truth speak for itself." Two men appeared, carrying a projector screen. A click, and suddenly photographs flashed across it. Images of Khloe taken from the shadows, grainy shots that stripped context away. Her leaving Robert's apartment late at night, their first kiss on the terrace, cropped to look staged. A report from a private investigator appeared next, filled with red underlines and damning phrases. No documented history of a relationship before 3 months ago. No evidence of shared life. An arrangement, not love. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. The whispers became knives. Khloe's breath caught, her body frozen as the images burned into the room. She had expected Madison to strike, but not like this, not here in front of hundreds. She could almost feel her credibility being stripped away, her new position crumbling. Then Robert was moving. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like thunder. Enough. The crowd fell silent. His green eyes blazed as he turned to Madison. You think love can be measured by photographs and receipts. You think because you pay investigators to stalk us, you can define what we are. He crossed the stage and pulled Khloe up beside him, his hand closing around hers, his voice fierce. This woman is not a distraction. She is the only person in this room who sees me for who I am, not for my last name, not for my fortune. And if anyone here doubts that, let me make it clear. Before anyone could react, Robert kissed her. Not a performance, not a reckless ploy, but a kiss filled with raw conviction, a kiss that made silence fall heavy across the room. When he broke away, he faced the crowd. Her name is Khloe Bennett. She is the woman I love, and if you want to question her place in my life, you'll have to go through me. Applause erupted, scattered at first, then growing louder, stronger. Theodore Carter rose from his seat, his cane tapping against the floor as he clapped. Soon, half the room joined, leaving Madison frozen on stage, her perfect smile cracked, her eyes blazing with defeat. Khloe stood trembling, tears threatening as Robert squeezed her hand. In that moment, she knew something had changed. The lie they had built had turned into a truth too powerful to hide. But she also knew Madison would not disappear quietly. She would strike again, and next time she would aim not just for Khloe's reputation, but for her very future. The days after the gala felt like walking on glass. Public opinion was split, the press buzzing with headlines about the billionaire who had defied tradition for a secretary from Savannah. Some called it scandal. Others called it love. But behind the glittering facade, the Carter family was in upheaval. Richard summoned Robert to the mansion, and Khloe knew the summons was not an invitation. It was a battlefield. She entered the great hall at Robert's side, the necklace at her throat, heavy with meaning. Theodore sat by the fireplace, his sharp blue eyes watching like a judge who had already seen the verdict. Richard stood tall, anger simmering beneath his polished exterior. Madison was there too, her presence like poison in the air, clutching a folder as if it were her sword. Richard's voice was cold. Robert, this charade has gone far enough. You've embarrassed this family in front of the entire city. If you don't end this nonsense, you will lose your seat as CEO. Robert didn't flinch. Then so be it. The room gasped. Madison stepped forward quickly, seizing her moment. Look at her, she sneered, pointing at Khloe. No pedigree, no history in society, no ties to our world. She's nothing but a distraction who saw her chance and grabbed it, and I can prove it. She opened the folder, pulling out documents. Records showing Khloe's debts, her mother's medical bills, her modest bank account. Madison's smile cut deep. She's drowning in bills. This isn't love, it's convenience. She needed rescuing, and you… Enough. Robert's voice cracked like a whip, but before he could continue, Khloe stepped forward. No, let her finish. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. Because for once, Madison, you are right. Do have debts. I do come from a small town where nobody expected me to climb higher than the library desk. My mother does need help, and I have struggled for every step I've taken. The room went silent. Khloe's gaze swept across them, fearless now. But you are wrong about one thing. I did not fall in love with Robert Carter because of his money. I fell in love with the man who works until midnight but still remembers his mother's necklace. The man who defied his father because he wanted to choose his own life. I fell in love with the man, not the empire. Her words hung in the air like fire. For a moment no one spoke. Then Theodore began to laugh, deep and genuine, his cane tapping against the floor. At last, he said, a woman who speaks truth without fear. Richard's expression faltered, the certainty in his eyes wavering. Madison's face twisted with fury, her last weapon shattered by honesty she could not fight. Robert turned to Khloe, his eyes burning with pride. You've said it better than I ever could. He dropped to one knee before her, pulling a velvet box from his pocket. Gasps echoed through the hall. Robert opened it, revealing a vintage diamond ring, its facets glowing in the firelight. Khloe Elizabeth Bennett, he said, his voice breaking with raw emotion. Months ago, I kissed you to escape a prison, but somewhere in that lie I found the only truth I will ever need. Will you marry me, not for protection, not for appearances, but because I cannot imagine a life without you? Tears blurred her vision. Her yes came out as a whisper, then louder, steadier. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. Robert slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, and this time there was no lie, no performance, only love blazing before the world. Theodore's clap thundered through the hall, followed by scattered applause. Even Richard lowered his head, defeated by the undeniable she of his son's choice. Madison stood frozen, her empire of schemes crumbling around her. When she finally turned and stormed out, no one stopped her. Khloe leaned into Robert's embrace, her heart racing, her life forever changed. The ruthless billionaire had kissed her once to escape an arranged marriage. But the next day, and every day after, he chose her not as a shield, but as his future.